Hello everyone, here is a brief summary of the movie Desert Flower. Its plot is based on real events. Waris Dirie is a 13-year-old shepherdess from Somalia. Her mother divided a flatbread into small pieces and gave them to all the children. Waris promises her younger brother that she will never leave him alone. The story then jumps to the future. Adult Waris wanders the streets of London and enters a fashion boutique, picking up a bag full of accessories. When a shop assistant approaches her and threatens to call security, Waris runs away and hides in the restroom. In the stall, she smiles as she looks at her passport. The teary-eyed shop assistant bursts into the restroom and once again encounters the Somali girl, who forgot to lock the stall. Waris knows only a few words in English, mostly memorized phrases, even though she has been living in London for 6 years. She follows an English woman who gets into an elevator. Marilyn tries to escape from the strange girl persistently following her. Waris is left alone and, finding a piece of cardboard, is forced to spend the night outdoors. She collects loose change and eats scraps from the trash. Waris sees her acquaintance on a bus and starts following her again. Feeling pity for the dirty and ragged Somali girl, Marilyn allows her to stay the night. However, Marilyn lives in a boarding house and the administrator doesn't want to let the homeless girl in. Today's weather is sunny rain, Waris says, using another memorized phrase. Marilyn eventually agrees to let Waris in but jokes, "Just don't pee on the carpet." Grateful, Waris kisses Marilyn's hand and calls her Mom. While Marilyn sleeps, Waris cleans the entire room and makes coffee. Marilyn writes down an address where Waris can try to find work and gives her a jacket. In the hallway, they run into the manager, Neil, who takes a liking to the girl with the exotic looks. Waris gets a job at a cafe. A customer reading a book notices her pocketing leftover food. The stranger, who turns out to be photographer Terry Donaldson, gives the pretty African girl his business card. Waris almost throws it away, but Terry asks her not to. The girl returns to the boarding house, ready to pay for her stay this time. Marilyn agrees when Waris calls her Mom again. Waris is shy about showing her body, so she undresses only in the shower stall. Marilyn decides to play a prank on her and steals her clothes. Waris cooks and studies English. She doesn't know her birth date, only that she was born during the rainy season. Neil peeks into the room and starts flirting with the Somali girl. Marilyn dreams of becoming a dancer, but receives another rejection letter. To cheer up her friend, Waris agrees to go to a nightclub with her. There, Waris locks eyes with a dark-skinned guy. Harold immediately approaches to introduce himself to Waris Dirie, but she tells him he can just call her Waris. Her name means desert flower. Harold takes off her puffer jacket and invites her to dance. He is from New York and makes a good impression on Waris, but she suddenly gets scared and runs out of the club. Back at the boarding house, Waris finds Marilyn entertaining a man in their room. "A decent woman wouldn't do this," Waris scolds her. "Only a circumcised woman is a good woman," she adds. Marilyn doesn't understand what she means and asks her to explain. Waris lowers her underwear. "They cut everything off and then sewed it up?" Marilyn asks, horrified. Waris was mutilated when she was just 3 years old, as were her sisters. Now Marilyn understands why Waris spends so much time in the restroom. Marilyn shows her how it's supposed to be and tells her that it's not necessary to undergo such procedures to be a woman. "No one does that here," she reassures her. Terry starts talking to Waris again. He tells her that she doesn't realize how beautiful she is. Waris is puzzled as to why her friend eats goat feed. She shows Marilyn the business card Terry gave her. Waris suddenly became alert when she heard Terry Donaldson's name. He was a famous photographer, and Waris could earn a lot of money working with him. Marilyn also had something to show her friend. Harold from the club had left his address in case Waris ever came to New York. However, her excitement turned to sadness as she wondered what Harold would think when he saw her scars. She was different. Suddenly, Waris had severe stomach pain, and Marilyn took her to the hospital. The gynecologist was shocked when he examined her and put down his instruments. "I can't give back what was taken from you," said the doctor, but I can make it so it doesn't hurt anymore. A male nurse who spoke Somali was brought in to translate. The doctor explained that Waris had a dangerously narrow opening and needed immediate surgery because the procedure she had endured was brutal and inhumane. However, the nurse mistranslated, telling Waris, "Aren't you ashamed to show your body to this white man? Our traditions don't concern them." The doctor was baffled that she had endured this for so long. The nurse then added that if Waris went through with the surgery, she would betray her people, disgrace her tribe, and shame her mother. Feeling conflicted, Waris stood up and left. Walking down the street, she fixated on a woman in a hijab, whose eyes were the only visible part of her face. The film flashes back to Waris's childhood. She complains to her mother about bleeding and pain. Her mother reassures her, saying, "That's good, you've become a woman." Soon after, Waris was brought to an old man with yellowed teeth who immediately reached for her. She was told that the next day she would become his fourth wife. Heartbroken, Waris could do nothing but wipe away her tears. Her family had already accepted the dowry. That night, Waris decided to escape to Mogadishu to find her grandmother. She promised her little brother that she would come back for him someday. Her mother did not try to stop her. The journey through the rocky desert was grueling. Waris's feet were torn and bleeding, but she pressed on, determined to reach the capital. Spotting a bush, she pounced on it, chewing on a branch for sustenance. Exhausted and starving, she cried, longing for her mother. Eventually, she made it to a road where a truck driver picked her up. However, he tried to take advantage of her. Waris fought back, hitting him on the head with a rock. Finally, she reached Mogadishu and found her grandmother, who gave her food and comfort. Her grandmother, impressed by the girl's courage and determination, declared that she had a chance at a better life and should never return to her old one. After careful thought, Waris returned to the hospital and underwent the surgery. Marilyn visited her afterward. Waris eventually went to Terry Donaldson's studio. Her first question was, "How much will you pay me?" She was determined to improve her life. Terry began photographing her, and though Waris squinted at every camera flash, the photographer was patient, distracting her with questions about her family. With a completed portfolio, Waris visited a modeling agency. She decided that being a model was better than being a cleaner. When asked if she could walk the runway, Waris confidently replied, "Of course, I walked all the way to Mogadishu." Waris put on high heels but walked as though she were on stilts. Lucinda, a woman from the agency, questioned why Waris wore a shapeless, baggy dress. Waris seemed to be hiding something, her scars. Lucinda paid for Waris's taxi ride to attend a casting call. Among many hopefuls, Waris had an advantage because Terry Donaldson vouched for her. After several photo shoots, Lucinda promised Waris a bright future. First Paris, then 2 major campaigns in America. Meanwhile, Marilyn still hoped to get into a dance studio, but realized she couldn't compete with the other dancers. Waris gifted her friend an expensive Gucci watch. Waris began practicing her runway walk in the dormitory hallway, coached by Marilyn. Suddenly, an angry Lucinda arrived at the boarding house and accused Waris of being an illegal immigrant. Her passport had expired 6 years ago. Waris now faced deportation back to the desert. Out of nowhere, Neil got down on one knee and proposed to Waris, suggesting they marry to solve her immigration problem. But it didn't come to that. Push introduced Waris to someone who could forge documents. Waris O'Sullivan was ready to go to Paris and attend a party with Johnny Depp. But at the airport, she was detained by the police. In the holding cell, the model remembered how her grandmother had sent her to England to work as a maid. Waris had tearfully said goodbye to her homeland, leaving her younger brother behind. From the airport, she was taken to the Somali embassy, where she lived in a small, cage-like room, spending her days cleaning. No one taught her English, and 6 years passed in this manner. During this time, a coup occurred in Somalia, and the embassy staff were recalled to the country. Waris, however, had no intention of returning. She dug out her hidden passport and stepped out onto the streets of London. Someone posted bail for Waris, and she learned that all she had to do was get one stamp within 6 months to qualify for political asylum. For now, she was granted a temporary residency permit, but had to check in weekly. One mistake, and she would be deported. Billboards and giant screens around the city displayed ads featuring Waris. Lucinda, still upset, made it clear that Waris would have to work off every penny of the £10,000 Lucinda had spent on hiring the best lawyer in London. Push apologized for putting Waris in such a difficult situation. Waris needed to work, but she decided to take the risky route of marrying Neil. Neil promised he wouldn't touch her, but Marilyn disapproved of the plan. Neil insisted they live together and even share a bed, saying immigration officers could show up at any moment. It was time to pay her debts. Waris arrived at the studio, where a large team was ready to work with her. When Terry arrived, he asked everyone to leave. For the calendar shoot, Waris would need to pose nude. Obediently, she undressed. Terry assured her that if the shoot went well, it would change her life. Waris trusted the professional, which helped her relax. She dreamed of seeing Harold again, but in reality, there was Neil, who called her his wife, yelled at her, and groped her. One night, immigration officers stormed the apartment. They searched every room, and Neil seized the moment to kiss Waris. Later, she told her friends she'd rather be deported to Somalia than endure another year living with him. She felt trapped, even having to share a bed with Neil. The Englishman was falling madly in love with her. Soon, Waris received a notice granting her indefinite leave to remain. She thanked Neil and immediately took off her wedding ring. Now she could work freely around the world. She conquered runways in many countries, becoming a true professional. The fashion icon now lived in an expensive New York apartment and ate healthily. She remembered Harold and went to the address he had given her. The young man didn't recognize her at first, but then his girlfriend appeared. Embarrassed, Waris quickly left. Too much time had passed. Her dreams had shattered against reality. Lucinda was outraged when Waris abandoned everything to go to Somalia and film a documentary about herself titled The Day That Changed My Life. Back in America, Waris gave an interview and clarified that the day that changed her life wasn't the day she met photographer Terry Donaldson. She was tired of the cliché stories about a nomad girl turning into a top model. Waris wanted to tell a different story, hoping it would be heard. She recalled the day when, at the age of 3, she embarked on a journey with her mother into the desert. There they met the woman, a butcher, who performed the horrific procedure using a dirty blade and a thorny branch. The wound became infected, and Waris developed a fever. Where her genitals had been, there was now only a large scar and an opening the size of a matchstick head. The severed parts were eaten by birds. Harold, sitting in a cafe, lamented that he hadn't realized what was happening when Waris visited him. He'd been entering his apartment with his neighbor at the time. Then he saw an interview with Waris in a magazine, where she spoke about the tragedy of female genital mutilation. Meanwhile, Waris was preparing to give a speech at the United Nations headquarters. Her friend came to support her, and later, Harold showed up too. For over 3,000 years, families in Africa have believed that an uncut daughter is impure. They think what lies between a girl's legs is unclean and must be removed and sewn up. On the wedding night, the groom uses a blade to cut the opening before consummating the marriage. Uncut girls are ostracized from their villages and equated with prostitutes. This practice continues despite not being prescribed by the Quran. The procedure leaves girls physically and emotionally scarred for life. One of Waris's sisters bled to death during the procedure, and another died during childbirth. As a child, Waris didn't want to be a woman because it was so painful and sad. But now she is proud of who she has become. Globally, 130 million women suffer from the consequences of female genital mutilation. Waris Dirie was the first woman to bring attention to this issue. In 1997, she was appointed a UN ambassador to combat this horrifying ritual. Since then, female genital mutilation has been banned in many countries. However, despite these efforts, more than 6,000 girls are still mutilated every day. Thank you for watching until the end. If you enjoyed this video and want to see more stories like this, don't forget to hit the like button, subscribe to the channel, and turn on the notification bell so you won't miss any new uploads.